and there's, evidence with the dare stones and everything that this is likely what happened. Obviously, they also left the word Croatoan and Crow there, and they talked about moving south to Croatoan Island anyways in the future. So, number 4, they starved to death because they couldn't live off of the land. Again, this is just as likely as anything else that happened. We already know they were low on food and everything, and we really covered this. Next up, we have cannibalism for reason number 5, which would have stemmed from starvation, sort of like the Donner Party situation, or soccer teams in the Andes situation, or really any situation where the situation sucked and they had to eat other dead humans to survive. Really, any of those situations is applicable here. Who knows? However, what we do know is that through the archaeological digs at Jamestown, there is now definitive proof of 3 separate settlers all having resorted to cannibalism. And they have bones with, like, teeth marks on them and stuff in 3 separate houses and everything, and it's really interesting. I'll see if I can find a good podcast on that and link it on the archaeological digs at Jamestown. But I watched a couple, like, newsy documentary shows about it. Like, not like a full documentary, but like an episode of a documentary. That's what I was trying to say. An episode of a documentary type style show.
A docu-series.
Thank you, docu-series. That's what they're called. Yes, an episode of a docu-series on the... and I read some newspaper articles, and I was like, oh, that is so cool and so interesting. So I'll see if I can find a podcast episode to link to, and if I do, I will link it in the show notes. But lastly... number 6 is we have an amalgamation of all the other reasons except really cannibalism, and this one is supported by a huge historical find that was found in the 1930s, which we are going to get back into right after this quick break, which is going to be the last break of the episode, so get your snacks and come back. We are talking conspiracy theories and what is possibly a massive historical find that solves a huge mystery that is hundreds of years old. We'll see what you think after this break. Okay, so we are back from the last commercial break. Hey, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
Now, let's run through these theories and talk about that historical find, shall we? So 1 and 2, again, we've got murdered by local tribes and murdered by the Spanish. Mm-hmm. I think likely, but I think that number 3... where you move south. Let's just go to number... Which one do you want to talk about? Let me say that.
I think they all deserve some airtime simply because they're all have their levels of validity. I personally think it's an amalgamation of all of them.
So do I.
I think some of them were just died off. Some due to cannibalism, some due to the elements. Because just later on down the line in history, when mountain men were a big thing, they would take and make references and notes to the different colored hairs, the different skin tones, even down to like actual facial structure differences. It's like these people clearly look different, and maintained that all the way up, till the founding of the country and beyond. I find that out of all of them, if I were to put like a least likely thing, I actually think least likely is that they were murdered by the pirates.
I think that's least likely too.
I think that's simply because after, the governor didn't return in time, whoever was elected to lead at that position would be like, okay, well, we know this is a port essentially for pirates. We don't have the garrison to fight. It's hostile there, but like we said, our backup plan was go down to the Croatian island and try there. So I see them moving before an assault is ever there, or ever a potential, or even by the time, like, you would see a ship out there docked, and then you'd see
You'd
people
think
rowing
they'd
in.
have time to hide.
Yeah.
Like, it's a mile offshore. It really, really takes away the element of surprise there.
Exactly. So I think they just went down and became a part of the other tribe.
The Croatoan tribe, yeah.
And lived
I
out. Because
really agree with you, and that's backed up by the historical evidence.
Yeah, and even later on in history, it was found that people who, like, went and lived with the native tribes, when picked back up by, you know, the Western culture, was like, hey, you know, given your others, what would you choose? They're like, I'd rather go back. Like, I want to go back to that.
Yeah.
So.
That's true.
Plus, it, simply from a survival standpoint and element, given that that's kind of where most of my wheelhouse is, it would make more sense to go be like, look, I'm dying on my own. What can I do to be a slave in your society? Because it makes sense to at least live as a slave in another society than die a free man in your own, for some.
I guess. For some, yes. That would make more sense. So we both agree, though, that we think it's an amalgamation of everything. But also, a big part of that is that the tribe, whatever colony was remaining, would have moved south to Croatoan Island and assimilated with the tribe there. This is backed up by that big historical find that I told you guys about, from the Great Depression, that might have solved this huge giant mystery. So this find is known as the Dare Stone. Some of you may have heard of it, but I think most of you won't, because I thought I knew a lot about Roanoke before I was researching this episode, and I had never heard of this. You don't learn about this in school, but this has been around since 1937.
To be fair, it takes a long time to update textbooks. Just in defense of the modern education system that I do hate. It does take a long time for them to update their textbooks, so they're usually 5 to 10 to 20 years behind the current information. This is why I think YouTube is a better education system than our education system.
So this stone, this Dare Stone, was found by this guy, Lewis E. Hammond, who was on a road trip from California with his wife when they pulled off of the highway about 60-ish miles away from the original Roanoke colony, so Hammond could search for hickory nuts. He's walking around, kicking the grass, looking for fallen nuts, when he stumbles across this bigger than a rock, smaller than a boulder, 21-pound rock on the ground, and he trips, and he is like, motherfucker. You know, like I do when I fall down, is how I imagine it. Well, he looks down at this rock and sees that it's round and flat. And it's written on both sides. And it looks like some weird English. And I'm going to read a translation of the first side of the stone here now. The front side said, Ananias Dare and Virginia Dare went to heaven 1598. Any Englishman show John White Governor EWD. And now that is that's a translation of the 1500s English that was found on there. We'll post a picture of the stones on Instagram and on the website, and you can see what was written, and you can make that out and make out like the spellings are all weird. There's extra E's and U's and stuff, but like you can make that part out.
Oh good, spelling was even more useless back then.
The other side is and was covered in much smaller carvings, and Hammond cannot make it out. But he's able to make out like a few words here and there, enough to put it in his car, because he knew where he was, put it in his car, haul it to Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, and have it checked out anyways, because he thought he could make some money off of it. Always, yeah. So they show up, and they show the stones to professors after being shown where to go and stuff, and they show up, and they show the professors, and the professors are like, huh! And Hammond's like, yeah, you guys want $1,000? You want to give me $1,000 for this? And they're like, hell yeah, we'll give you $1,000 for this. And, they buy it from Hammond for $1,000. So I'm going to read the second side of the stone translated now. Said, Father, soon after you left, we came here. There was only misery and war for 2 years. Over half of us are dead. The stone also says that Emory tribes murdered almost, that native tribes murdered almost everyone. So the Emory professors published an article in the May 1938 issue of the Journal of Southern History. That's where this is how Dr. Haywood J. Pierce, the Emory history professor, became like such a fierce supporter of the Dare Stones, and like convinced everybody to buy the stone from Hammond. This is where he comes from. His dad, Pierce Sr., because he's a junior, is the sole owner and operator of the private college, Brunel College in Gainesville, Georgia, which is now Brunel University, where the stones still reside to this day. Pierce led a search for the second stone mentioned in the text, because there's a second stone mentioned with a mass grave, but nothing was found. Knowing that the second stone would authenticate the first, authenticate. Wow. I'm gonna leave that in. My brain would not work that there. A+. Okay. Authenticate the first, solve its mystery, and rewrite history. The Pierces offered a $500 reward for the stone, which I think was a huge mistake. So, I'm just gonna read you this big old quote from ncpedia.org, because it's just, they did all this amazing legwork, and it looks amazing. It was amazing, so I'm just gonna give them all the credit, and I'm going to read this. Enter Bill Ebhart, a stonecutter from Fulton County, Georgia. In the summer of 1939, he claimed to have found the second stone, engraved with the names of 17 deceased English colonists. He claimed to have found it near Pelzer, South Carolina, and showed the Pierces the site. In fact, he said he had found 13 stones there and provided them to the Pierces. This was only the beginning. All in all, Bill Ebhart provided the Pierces with 42 stones, all later deemed forgeries, for which he was paid a total of about $2,000 at the time, which is about $39,400 now. A few other stones were provided by Ebhart's cohorts. These stones indicates that the survivors journeyed southwest from the Edenton, North Carolina area through South Carolina to Georgia. They go on to say that Eleanor and the 6 survivors found refuge with friendly Cherokees in a town I can't pronounce, and that Eleanor married an American chief in 1593, gave birth to his daughter Agnes, and finally died in 1599 in a cave on the Chattahoochee River near present-day Atlanta. The Dare Stones became news, and investigative reporter Boyden Sparks published a damning expose in the April 26, 1941 Saturday Evening Post magazine, claiming the whole thing was a hoax. Problems with the stones included anachronistic language, a consistency of spelling atypical of the time, and even hidden acrostics. I don't know what those words mean, but all of it sounds bad, guys. The names of the colonists did not match